Hello and welcome to Behind the Locked Doors, a podcast that's actually just a conference call that really could have been an email. This is our take two of this because the first one was so chaotic that we just had to call a mulligan and start over. So if we are a little bit out of sorts, that's why. I am. In fact, I didn't even introduce myself yet. I am Scott Paladin, and I am writing a horny werewolf podcast called It Takes a Wolf.
And I'm Sam Stark. I am writing As in West, which is a spin-off of Unspeakable Distance.
Yes. So our check, for the record, I almost called Jack Link again. I always do this.
Oh, yeah.
I like feel it about to come out of my mouth. Jack is out again. They are still moving. We're sending our love to them because that is a fucking time and a half for even in the best of times. So, Sam, how did you do on your homework?
My homework was to get with Jack and
Yeah.
kind of go over the beginning of the podcast, but because Jack is in the middle of moving,
Yeah.
We did the, ships crossing in the night. Hey, we should meet at some point, but I didn't want to put anything else on them since, yes, moving is absolutely terrible.
Yeah. But you said you got some, or yeah, you already told me that you got some additional planning done, I think.
Yes, I didn't do what I assigned myself for homework, but I did do other things. I worked through some other issues that I had, and I put everything in a new Excel spreadsheet because, as I said before, I've already told this story.
Yeah.
Because I am not a planner, but I'm also not really a pantser. Oh, there's the cat. I'm not really a pantser either. I do the skeletons of things. I work towards specific plot points, but I don't really do anything else. Hold on. Hey, can you
See I think the cat's about to knock some stuff over.
Oh my god, cat. You've already completely destroyed an episode once. All right. Hopefully everybody can still hear me and everything is still working.
I can hear you, and I can see the I can see a bed, so we're still good. Obviously, the cat should just get on the bed so that I can watch the cat.
Yeah, you can.
That would be the ideal.
No, he's gonna try and destroy the foam paneling on the inside of my booth. Yay!
Okay, so yeah, you got some skeletonizing done, and let's see. On my end, I have made more progress on episode 3. It's not done, but it's like coming in on the home stretch. So I should be able to get that finished relatively quickly. That is 3 of 8. So I am not that far from being halfway done with like my initial write through, because the rule I've set for myself is that I am going to write everything. All of the episodes are going to have a draft done before I go back in and start like making things work and making changes and stuff like that and start doing editing. So that's kind of exciting. That feels almost like I'm about to hit a milestone, which is cool.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. Now, I think I don't know if this is something that you have thought about yet, but what do you think the runtime for your episodes are going to be?
They are they're all almost about almost kind of bang on 5,000 words, which for me runs to about 35 to 40 minutes. Typically when I've had that kind of translation in the past. So that's about what they're going to run. I'm guessing anyway. That's kind of how it feels. I haven't really been setting a goal for myself in that way, but that seems to be how things are working out.
That's cool. I only ask because there was some Discord on, I think it was, I'm not sure. And it was people talking about lengths of podcasts, and obviously it varies through genre.
Oh yeah.
Because if you're listening to a Talking Heads podcast, people listen to 3 hours of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
But if it's an actual audio drama, there's there's one side of the fence or the other. Like some people are like, you need half an hour and that's all you need, like between 20 and 30 minutes. And some people are like, I want an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. And it's like really divided. And it's just it's an interesting thing because like I don't really notice the difference. Like I binge everything that I listen to anyway.
Yeah. I think that like, I like that the genre, the format has lots of variation because like the fact that Sinkhole, done by our friend Cale Brown, which is amazing. You should go listen to it if you haven't. Those episodes are like 10 to 20 minutes at most. Like they're real short. The fact that they are short was a huge benefit for like letting me get through it. Right. Like that just was not an investment of time, and they're exactly as long as they need to be, and I really, really like that that exists.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, season 4 of Breathing Space, is like the one where everybody went off the hook, and I'm like, I don't of the episodes proper, I don't think we have a one that's less than an hour. I think like they're all coming in an hour.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
and like I like that as an audience member, I'm like both of those things can exist, and I don't think that like the one is necessarily better than the other. It's just like the preference from the audience.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely think I am of two minds about how whether or not you should even be setting a goal for yourself, though. I am not currently setting a goal for myself, and like on Breathing Space, we originally started off with like we're gonna hit 30 minutes. 30 minutes is our time that we're gonna shoot for. That was
Mhm.
season one. That got blown out the window in season one. Like within the space of writing a single season, we said that that can't happen. And the watchword has been since then that stories are as long as they need to be,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
which is I think a really um it can be a gentle way to approach yourself where you're like you're not writing to an arbitrary number. And which I think is good because sometimes you write a story and it only takes 20 minutes to get through, and sometimes you write a story and it really does need the whole hour, and it's packed and the pacing's all good and all that stuff. I
Mhm.
do think that there is when you give yourself the freedom to just be as long as it needs to be, sometimes that relieves you of the pressure to edit, and to make things brief when they can be brief, and to like cut out unnecessary fat and stuff like that. And it allows you to be uh lax in what you're writing. That's not always the case, but sometimes that can be that the additional pressure of can you make this a bit shorter to keep it, to keep it a little bit snappier, to remove, to not waste your time and our time and production time on it,
Mhm.
is a valuable thing that I think is sometimes uh arbitrary. Like I don't think it's valuable enough to set yourself to necessarily set yourself an arbitrary time limit of like we are only going to do half an hour and no more, the way like a half hour TV show would. But like there is definitely value to like having some pressure to not just go on and on and on. And that, and art comes from limitations and things like that sometimes
Mhm.
too. So I don't know. I it's not something that I can give like a definite like thing of you should do it this way or you shouldn't do it this way, but it is something that as you are going through the process of making any kind of story, like being cognizant of, I don't, the tension between making it as long as or as short as the story dictates for itself versus like trying to make it fit a format and a time length, or to cut fat, or to make it, to give yourself the or sometimes you need to expand something that's longer. I just talked about The Man from Earth with Anna. It'll be on my interview podcast, and like there's a 30-minute section of that movie that probably should be cut, but then the movie would be too short. So you might as well put it in, you know?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I yeah.
Yeah.
The it's this whole particular conversation is so crazy because
Yeah.
in my writers group,
Yeah.
I'm well, there's me and one other person that are basically like we we just don't write short.
Yeah.
And all the all the calls for fiction for like magazines and stuff, like
Yeah.
online magazines, they're all like they give this great prompt and they have this wonderful thing set up with all this art ready to go, and then they're like, "Okay, we want your stories that are between 5,000 and 7,000 words."
Yeah.
And I'm just like, You want me to write a story that's only 7,000 words?" Like, sometimes I can't even fathom that,
Yeah.
and trying to put us for me,
Yeah.
trying to put some stories within a word count is
Yeah.
just no, I can't do it, and it, like, completely destroys all my creativity.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when I was writing my book and I was putting it up on Vella,
Yeah.
they only allow you to do 5,000 word chapters.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because each chapter was a tiny part of the whole, or
Yeah.
if it was just giving me structure and something for me to write to every single week, but it worked. Like, that worked. I was able to write chapters that were right around 5,000 words every single week, and it actually kind of helped because I had something that, like, a specific definitive thing to work for every week. But
Yeah.
if you had told me you gotta write a story that's 5,000 words long, I would have been like, fuck you." So it's so weird, and
Yeah. I get, yeah.
it's a combination of, like,
It really is, and
Sometimes it's constraining and sometimes it's helpful. It's
yeah,
weird.
I would encourage, you and anybody who is listening to this to uh, what's the way I wanna phrase this? It's definitely not an essentialist kind of thing where you're like, "I can't do this." You can absolutely do it, but it's not necessarily the best approach for every project, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. Like, it
yeah.
obviously that sort of chapter word limit worked really well for you in one circumstance, but when you are presented with the idea of doing a self-sustained story in a similar sort of structure, that for whatever reason doesn't jive with the way your brain works.
Mhm.
I'm sure that you could make it work. It's one of the things like I don't writing is a skill. Like it's a muscle that you can build up over time. My my foster dog is bothering one of my other dogs, and I'm hearing them growling. Um, so it's a muscle you can build up. Even particular types of writing are things that you can like work at and get better at. And oh, it's because he has a bone and he doesn't want the other one to take it from
Oh, they're so cute.
him. So like I don't think I mean, like, there may be things, that are sort of built into people's nature that they just can't do certain things, but I think that if you are willing to be open and not take it too seriously and try, that, like, you actually will find I think most people will find that they can do things they wouldn't have thought they were able to, and be good at them. The I don't know if I've talked about this on pod, but, I spent, like, a year writing very short form erotica for money.
Mhm,
Um which was and the whole reason why this business model doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be that the payment structure for the Amazon like independent like ebook delivery system worked out that like 5,000 to 7,000 word titles you could make a bunch of money off of them, because you could just pump them out and you get paid based on like people reading your work, and it would
mhm.
be a little bit of money for every person, but a bunch of people could read them. So the I was I was similar to I felt very similarly to you do before I started doing it. I'm like 5 to 7,000 words, that's not enough time to do anything. Like it's just not. Like you can barely establish who your characters are in that time. And then I spent like a solid 8 months doing that really really consistently. And just because you can't you I mean in theory there was no hard limit. You could go longer. But like if you do that, you're leaving money on the table because
Mhm.
you don't get paid any extra for having extra words.
Yeah,
So, you're just the incentive is that you just need to just chug stuff out. And after doing it for a while, I found that it like fundamentally changed the way that I approach storytelling because I realized like how easy, not how easy, but how how effective it can be to leave things out of the story that are not necessary to like
yeah.
provide just like the bare minimum of what is necessary for people to get what you're talking about and let them fill in all the rest. And for some genres that works really well, and for other genres it doesn't necessarily jive as completely. I don't think that you can write like a epic fantasy novel that way. But like it was something that I absolutely thought I could not do, and then I was not forced to do it, but encouraged to do it from economics, and I found that I am now good at it. It's a thing that I feel is sort of a fundamental part of my writing style now.
Nice.
So I like yeah, really just say that like the brain has more plasticity in it than you might imagine, and you can figure things out. And you really can't like if it's a thing that you think, oh, I could not work that way. I bet you could. I bet you could. Is my the way I'd say.
And I
Uh-huh.
have done it. It's just not my
Yeah,
preferred.
obviously. I mean, you wrote a whole book that way.
The other thing I think is really important when you are, like, if you're like me and you write long and you
Mhm.
are, given a task where you have to write short, you have to also choose the right story because there
Yeah.
are stories in your brain that are not going to fit in 5,000 words. And
Yes, of
so
course.
a lot of the time, because my writers group used to do like we would meet every other week and we would write stories for each other and we would like practice and stuff.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, I just kind of had to knuckle down and write something that was under, whatever the word count was for
Mhm.
the week. And it's really important to just find the story that actually does that because
Yeah,
a lot of the
for
times,
100%.
yeah, when a lot of the times when I'm looking at these calls, these prompts, I just think of a novel. I think of all these things that I can do in this huge
Yeah.
story, and that's just where my brain goes immediately. And you have to like, okay, now you have to take this piece of this story that you want to tell. You have to like
Yeah.
tell the story that's going to fit in 5,000 words, and not the novel,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's another thing that I have to work on in my brain. Because I mean, I wrote one episode for um, Ash's paranormal,
Mhm.
uh, and that was kind of hard because it's like you got to fit it in this little half an hour spot. But
Yeah,
I was like, no, I'll just tell the story that fits in here. You just have
yeah,
to kind of make your brain do the thing.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And interestingly to me, like again, I felt very much the same way about like I can't write short. I can't write short. I have to write these big, long, epic things. And then uh, I did the erotica stuff for a little bit, and then I had a break, and then we did Breathing Space. And Breathing Space is an anthology. That was the first time that was the first serious writing I'd done in a few years, and because of that, I was also forced to be like, okay, I have to tell something that fits into 5 or 7,000 words of dialogue, which is different. It's not the same as 5,000 words of prose. 5,000
Yeah,
words of dialogue is way longer
yeah.
than 5,000 words of prose, but um, it is still there are these self-contained stories. They don't have longer arcs, and I got again. I spent a couple of years doing that. I feel like I'm pretty good at it. And then when I started to do It Takes a Wolf, I'm like, oh, all of these longer form muscles, they're totally atrophied now. I have definitely been feeling the struggle of like rejiggering my brain such that I can like get it into the mode of like doing a longer form thing. But so like yeah, but it's a thing that you can do it. I think that it's and also probably much like many other skills, the more different forms of writing and storytelling that you practice, the better you'll get at kind of everything. Like skills transfer. It's not just a matter of like it's not like a a video game where if you put points into poetry writing that won't improve your prose writing. No, like it all helps.
Yeah,
Uh,
and my writing in general, um, just
yeah,
it got so much better after I started doing shorter stuff with my writers group. I don't do it
yeah,
much anymore. I don't do actually a lot of writing now,
sure,
but my craft, I guess,
yeah.
was enriched because I
Yeah.
made myself do other stuff.
Well, like the the I think a really important part of becoming better at something like writing or art or any kind of like creation is something that people sometimes forget, which is that you need the cycle, not necessarily feedback, but the cycle of you create a thing and then you look at it and see how you feel about it and like
Mhm,
have it. And it is important in a lot of ways for you to I'm not going to say you have to finish a thing to look back at it, but that's when people normally do it. Like they'll write the
mhm,
whole novel and then they'll go back and they'll read it and do the second draft and editing, but then they'll get done with it. And when they are done, they'll be like, okay, now that it's finished, how do I feel about the finished product?
yeah,
And that almost like that little bit where at the end where you start to like introspectively think about how the process, how it went, and how the end result turned out, and how that all worked. That is really important to actually improving. If you sat down and wrote and rewrote the same novel over and over again, never finishing it, and never like sitting back to like look at it as a done product, if you did that for 20 years, I don't think that you would not have gotten as good as if you had spent the exact same time just churning things out, finishing them, having
oh,
that
yeah,
evaluation period, and then being like, okay, how do I feel about that?
no,
Yeah. So it's like you don't necessarily. I don't want to tell people that they have to have feedback from outside sources because that could be um, that can be very useful, but we've talked in the past about how sometimes getting amateur advice is like worse than nothing, you know.
absolutely the worst, yes.
But like you as a writer, as anybody who creates art, you just looking at it and going, because you have taste, you've watched movies, you've read books, you know what's good and what's not good. So like if you go back and look at it and say, honestly, how do I feel about this? What can I discover that I didn't intend to put here? Things like that. Like that's a really important part. And I'm actually like I think I may have mentioned this, but I'm really glad that we started this podcast, not only because it has been really good for productivity, but also because this has become a point where you and I am forced to think about the process of writing,
Mhm,
and that has given me little moments over the course of working on this larger project. This project's not anywhere close to being done yet, but because I am forced to be introspective about what I've done and how it's worked and how the way that I have worked has resulted in what I've got so far, I found myself like I feel like I've learned more in the last 6 months than I did in the previous like 10 years, just because I've spent more time thinking about it actively. And part of that was, yeah, part of that
You're
was,
very welcome. No, I'm just kidding.
but I mean, like part of it was like having a scenario where, you know, we are every couple of weeks we get together and I have to have something to, not have to, but I feel compelled to have something to say about it. And that it makes me think about it. And
Yeah, for
that
me,
moment
I
of
get
noticing is
excited.
really important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for me, I get excited. Like
Yeah.
when we're
Yeah.
gonna do when it's the week of the podcast week.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense if I say it that way because every week is podcast week for me. But
Yeah.
um, when it's our podcast week,
Yeah.
it's cool because I can be like, oh, I have stuff to talk about, and
Yeah.
I'll be able to hear what Scott and Jack have to talk about, and
Yeah.
so it's a very positive,
Yeah.
uplifting thing, and it doesn't ever feel pressuring, which
Yes.
is what everybody needs.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that.
It's really been very, very helpful. Okay. I should grab myself some lunch before I go back to work. So let's real quick set ourselves some expectations.
Mm.
Do you want to repeat on trying to work with Jack again, or do you have a different plan?
Yeah, I still need to sit down with Jack and specifically talk about the beginning of the podcast because it is
Yeah.
absolutely what is holding me up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel that really hard where you're like, when you have that instinct to work linearly because you want to like make it sure everything, you know, is built on a good foundation and all that stuff.
Mhm. And
And so if you get to that
especially
moment,
since
you're like, well, I don't know
that's
what
the
this is,
whole
so I can't do the thing next to it, you know?
Yeah, exactly, and especially since this beginning of this podcast is actually the backbone of the entire podcast. It's like
Yeah.
the actual thing that the entire podcast hinges on,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we
and
need to
because
get
you're
it
having to
right.
explain backstory, and it's an opportunity to recontextualize some of that and make it, you
Yes.
know, yeah, I understand. Like, just need to sit down. Yeah, hopefully y'all can find a time to do it. I will hopefully not monopolize Jack's time with whatever intensely long conversation about Starship Troopers we have next weekend will be. So hopefully they find time in addition to that. Okay, great. Um, Similarly to last time, I am also I think I can finish episode 3, at least to, you know, the satisfaction that I will move on to the next one. Probably this weekend, honestly,
Mhm.
provided I get some time on it. And then, I I don't know if I want to dig immediately into episode 4 or if I want to start. I started to do work on some of the more high concept episodes, which are coming
Mhm.
later in the season, and one of which is a flashback, so it doesn't need to flow into or out of the other things, so it's easier to work on its own. And I think I might want to actually spend some time on those ideas because that will I can work out of order, and they don't necessarily mean I get stuck on stuff. But also, it means that that can give me that. Sometimes you do stuff like that where you're like, oh, I haven't written the flashback yet. I'll write the flashback, and that informs the way the character acts in the present, kind of stuff like that. I think
Mhm.
it might be worth thinking about. So I can't guarantee which one I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do one of the two. Either I'm gonna be working on the flashback episode, or I'll dig into 4.
Ooh, very exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we will catch y'all in 2 weeks. Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you for joining us for Behind the Locked Doors, a library of cursed knowledge production podcast thing. I don't know. If you are interested in any of these projects, you can head over to library.horse, which will eventually redirect to a webpage once I make it, you know. If you want to support the podcast, we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/cursed knowledge. See y'all next week. No, wait. See y'all in 2 weeks.